Let's review what we learned about in this part of the activity. So we learned about for loops, the kind that have an initialization section where they initialize the looping variable, then a condition that tests the current value of the looping variable, and then an increment section or an update section, and in this case where it increments the looping variable. We used here the length property of the array as an ending point. In this case, we're looping through an array. Now, for loops can loop for other things, but one of the common things that they're used for is to loop through an array. Then we learned that in JavaScript, there's a for in loop, and that this one loops through the properties of an object. We learned about the for of loop, and that this loop will loop through the elements of any iterable object. So arrays certainly count. We saw a demonstration of strings and how to loop through each individual character in a string. But there are lots of objects that are iterable, and so the for of loop can move through any of those types of objects. Then there's a while loop, and a while loop is based on a condition. So it is a for loop, right? The for loop has a condition embedded in it, but a while loop is exclusive on the condition, and it just tests that condition each time before it enters the loop. A version of a while loop is the do while loop, and the difference in the do while loop is that it always executes the first one and then tests the condition after. We became aware of the JavaScript comparison operators. The standard one is equal, not equal, greater than, less than. And then these more novel ones that both compare the value and the type, and the not value and type. And so these are new comparison operators. They're required because it's a weakly type language that JavaScript will adapt types to make matches. And then the logical operators, and, or, and not. And then we learned about array iteration methods. And array iteration methods call a function for each element in an array. So they iterate over the array, and for each element they call a specific function. And when they do this call, they send arguments. They send the array element and the array index and the array. And some have additional arguments. And the order of these arguments match the parameters. So you can define your function to accept any of these values, right? That the element comes first, so you need to have that as your first parameter, then the index and the array. And you don't have to use all of them. The array element is the one that that is required. The other two are optional, whether you use them or not. And there are lots of array iteration methods. We went over 3 of them, the for each. And the for each, based on the array, will go through the array, and for each element in the array, one at a time, it will call this function, whichever function you list in here. And notice that when you're using the function here, you're using the function name, not parentheses. Map creates a new array, and it goes through each element of the original array, calls a function, and then stores the return value in the new array. And it doesn't make any change to the original array, puts all of the new values in the new array. And the last array iteration method that we looked at was the filter method, and this one also creates a new array and calls a function with each element, and now it actually does a test inside that, right? So there's a test inside the function, and it will return true or false. If it's true, then the current element will be added to the new array. If it's false, then it will not. So it takes values from the original array, and it either adds them to the new array or doesn't, based on the results of calling the function. So lots of different ways to loop.